Have you ever wondered what happens when a helicopter runs out of fuel in the middle of nowhere? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you all about how I get this thing back flying again. Hi, I'm Rick James with The Pilot Teacher, and today we're going to talk about how I refuel a helicopter like this A-Star in a remote location. It's easy. When I'm here at the airport, I just call the fuel truck or park next to the fuel bowser. But what happens when I'm out in a remote location working on a job? This video is going to show you how I refuel this aircraft. So when I'm working out in a remote location, there are kind of two ways that I can get fuel. One, I either use a fuel cache that has already been placed out there, or two, I take my own fuel with me. And the way that we get fuel out to a remote location is using 55-gallon drums. Now, if I'm going to be going to a location where there's no fuel cache, then what I can do is I can put 2 or 3 full fuel drums in a net and sling them out using a long line. So when I go out to the job, I can then take the fuel with me. But that only works if I'm not taking passengers, because when we're slinging, we're not allowed to take passengers on board. So if I'm going out to a location where I've got a few days worth of work, sometimes I'll get the fuel and I'll sling it out there before, if I can't take it by truck, and put the fuel cache ready. Other times, if there's a fuel cache there, if it's a popular location where there's always a lot of work going on, sometimes the company that we are working for, or if it's a government agency, will have fuel caches dotted around all over the place, so it allows the machines to easily get fuel and not waste time. That's especially true on wildfires. When it comes to wildfire season, the government have set up fuel caches all over the place, so in the event of a fire taking off in any of those areas, it's easy for the helicopters to jump in and out to get fuel and not have to go long distances, and allows more time to be on the fire. So once we've got to a fuel cache, then we're going to take the refueling gear out of the helicopter and use that to refuel the aircraft. So now I'm going to show you what all the refueling gear is and how I set it up. So all utility helicopters, especially the ones that I've flown anyway, we always have our refueling gear in one of the side pods of the aircraft, and without it, you run out of fuel, you're pooched. So whenever I come on tour, the first thing I do is, when I get all my machine ready, is I get my fueling gear out, make sure the filters are recently changed, and I also check the fuel pump to make sure it works, because there's nothing worse than getting out to a fuel cache and you're on low fuel and then your fueling gear doesn't work, because then it's a very tough call to make to the boss to say, hey, can you bring me out a spare fuel pump? And the question is, why didn't you test it before? So yep, we carry the fueling gear with us, and let's go set it up. So jet fuel stinks, so you always want to make sure you got a pair of gloves with you, because it's like a diesel smell, and if you get it on you, especially if it pukes out on you and you get it on your clothes, and especially if it's warm in the summer, oh man, it just stinks in the cockpit and it can make you nauseous. So good pair of gloves, and then you can just put them back away when you're finished using them. So the first two parts: drum wrench, that allows us to get the cap off the drum. Standpipe, the fuel pump goes on the top of this, and the standpipe goes all the way down into the bottom of the drum, so it can suck up the fuel all the way down to the bottom of the fuel drum. So fuel hose to connect from the pump to the fuel cap. Filter assembly, so this is basically just a sediment filter and like a water separator filter, because we don't want any water going into the fuel tank. Water going into a gas turbine engine can make it flame out, and that's just going to lead to a really bad day. So filter assembly. And last but not least, the fuel pump. This is just a 24 volt DC fuel pump, and I can plug it into the front of the aircraft and it runs off the aircraft battery to fuel the aircraft. Then the last thing we've got is this blue box, and in there I've just got spare filters for the filter assembly. I've got some water detection paste that I can put on the bottom of the standpipe, and I can put that into the drum, and then I've just got some like a spill kit in there just in case we have an incident and we need to clean up some fuel. So that just generally stays in the aircraft unless we need it. So let's go set all this up and then you can see how I get fuel. So one of the most important things that we want to check for when you're refueling from drums that you've not filled up especially is to check for water. And the way that we do that is a flashlight, and we can look in the drum. So this drum's good, it's got no water in, but you can see in this video here of what water looks like in a fuel drum. So if some of you are thinking, what does water look like? Let's see if I can try and get them. Basically, fuel and water do not mix. So if you can see like these tiny balls of water, that is what the water looks like. You actually can see them reflecting off the light. So yeah, they just sit at the bottom because the water is heavier than the fuel, so they sit on the bottom of the tank. And that is why we don't want to use fuel that has water in it, because it goes in the engine and it makes the engine go quiet. So that is what I'm looking for when I get my flashlight out and I'm looking into the drum. If we get any water in fuel, close the drum back up, mark it with a big X, water in fuel, put it aside so nobody else uses it. We don't want to be getting water into the helicopter. So the next thing is the standpipe. So once the standpipe's in, then we go and put the fuel pump on. So when I was a very new pilot, nobody showed me how to use a refueling pump, and I remember the first time I had to refuel out in the bush, I was low on fuel, and the two connections on the pump are the same, and I put the pump in the wrong way around. So I connected the outlet of the pump to the standpipe and I couldn't suck fuel. I was getting really nervous because I was stuck in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't get fuel. It took me about 20 minutes of messing around thinking there was something wrong with the pump. I took all the pump apart, I took the filters apart, and then I decided to finally turn the pump around. After turning the pump around, well, miraculously it worked. So any of you new pilots out there, always test your gear before you go out. If you've never used it before, test it whilst you're at the airport. Ask somebody to show you how it works, because that day, I swear, took 5 years off my life in stress. And it was all because I got the pump the wrong way around. Simple mistake, but it's like everything in life, right? If you don't know, the simplest things can cause you the biggest hassles. So always try out your gear if you're unsure at the hangar when there's somebody there to ask. So now I've got the pump connected. Now what we can do is connect the rest of it up. So another tip for young pilots, new pilots, junior pilots, whatever you want to refer to yourself as, but fuel caps get lost all the time, and most people will put the fuel cap on the ski basket or on the side when they are refueling, and that's how so many of them get lost, because people forget, they put all the fuel stuff away, they jump in, fly off, get to the destination, and then see an open hole, no cap, and it's like, uh-oh. So one of the best ways that I got taught by an old salt pilot, stick the fuel cap on your seat, because that way you will never ever forget it. And it saved my butt a couple of times. So take it off, put it on your seat. For the A-Star, the refueling gear is on the passenger side, so I always just put the fuel cap on the passenger seat. Whenever I get to start the aircraft, it's obvious, it's a black seat and it's got a shiny fuel cap on it. So when you're in a Bell or a Jet Ranger, or the fuel cap is on the other side, it's easy just to put it on your seat. But for the A-Star, I stick it on the passenger seat and it works just as good. So now it's all connected, we've got the pump connected, we've got the filter assembly, we've got the hose in, it's all grounded. Now I can go and plug the pump into the aircraft and refuel the helicopter. And that's it, that's how I refuel the aircraft. A 55-gallon drum, about 205 litres. This aircraft burns 180 litres an hour at full power. So, you know, I get like an hour 15 out of a full drum. So it's pretty handy. So that's how I refuel a helicopter in the middle of nowhere. Now it's finished fueling, let's go and pack it all away. So now all the fueling gear is packed away. If you only ever use like half a drum, what we do is we write the aircraft registration and the date of when the drum was opened and how much is left, just so it makes it easy for the next pilot coming along to use that drum first. They know when it's been opened, they can go and have a quick check. So we always carry a Sharpie marker just so you can write on it. So can you remember how I said about how it's so easy to forget the fuel cap? I could pack this stuff away now and forget about the fuel cap, so always remember the fuel cap. So I got a bit of a story about my early days. Fuel, I seem to always have problems with fuel when I was a young guy. It's my first kind of job out of flight school, and I was actually the same company when I couldn't figure out the fuel pump. Their fuel caps used to be on lanyards, so they couldn't be left, they couldn't be lost. And I did the same thing. I packed everything away, went flying, and I could hear this banging. So I landed the aircraft to inspect what the banging was, and I'd forgotten to put the fuel cap back on. So that lanyard had held that fuel cap in place, but the problem was it had battered all the paint within a 10-inch radius around the fuel cap. And I was mortified. I thought I was going to get fired. I was devastated. I tell you, that first year coming out of flight school, oh my goodness, did I have some stressful days. So filed an incident report with the company and, you know, spoke with the chief pilot, what was the causes, why, all that kind of stuff. And the thing about it was a freshly painted aircraft. I felt so bad. 2 weeks later, my cross shift had come in, another junior pilot ended up crashing the machine. Luckily he walked away and he was fine, but the aircraft was a write-off, so I didn't feel too bad after that. But fuel caps can cause you so much stress, so put them back in. It's the one thing you've got to remember when you're refueling, apart from the water in the fuel, is putting that fuel cap back on. And there you have it. That is how we refuel a helicopter in the bush. Best make this quick, so I've got a Bell 212 lifting off right next to me, and it's going to get real loud real quick. So some of you may be squawking on YouTube, wow, he's refueling at the airport, why isn't he refueling out in the bush? I've been wanting to make this video for months, and of course I've not had a job where I need to refuel out in the bush. So it just got to a point where I'm like, you know what, I've just got to do it at the airport. So to those trolls that are on YouTube, yes, I know I'm not refueling out in the bush at this particular time, but this is the process that I go through to refuel. So if you found this enjoyable, give that subscribe button a push, make sure you hit that notification bell, that way you'll know exactly when my next video comes out. If you liked it, give that thumb button a smash, really helps the channel. I have new videos coming out like this every week. If you have any questions, stick them in the comments below. And yeah, if you found this interesting, check out my other videos I've got here. I've got all kinds of crazy stuff, which I hope you'll find interesting. So if you enjoyed it, great. I enjoyed making it, so I'll see you on the next one.